When I look back on my life, it's hard to believe how far I've come. My childhood was anything but ordinary. It was a crucible of hardship and lessons in resilience. I grew up in a small, worn-down house on the outskirts of a city where dreams often died before they could take flight. My parents, hardworking and kind, barely made ends meet. They poured everything they had into keeping food on the table and a roof over our heads. Luxuries like new clothes or toys were out of the question. I often wore hand-me-downs that didn't fit quite right, but I learned to make do. School was a safe haven but also a reminder of the things I didn't have. I was a quiet kid, often sitting in the back of the classroom, trying to make myself invisible. I remember the sting of watching my classmates come to school with shiny new backpacks and the latest gadgets while I carried my books in a fraying old bag. But I had something they didn't, an unrelenting drive to rise above my circumstances. My parents, bless them, believed in the power of education. They constantly told me that knowledge was the one thing no one could take away from me. I took those words to heart. While other kids spent their evenings playing video games or hanging out, I buried myself in books borrowed from the public library. The world of words became my escape, a place where I could dream of a better future. As I approached high school graduation, the harsh reality hit me: there was no money for college. I remember the ache in my chest when my father sat me down one evening and said, "Son, we wish we could do more, but we just don't have it." I nodded, hiding my disappointment, and resolved to find another way. That's when I learned about a scholarship to my dream university. It was my only shot. The competition was fierce, and I was convinced I didn't stand a chance. But I poured every ounce of energy into my application, wrote the most heartfelt essay I could, and prayed for a miracle. The day the scholarship results were announced is etched in my memory. My heart raced as I scanned the list of recipients, my eyes darting over name after name. I reached the very bottom, and there it was, my name. I was the last one on the list. Relief and joy washed over me in waves. It didn't matter that I had barely made it, I was in. With that scholarship, I was about to step into a new world. Little did I know, it would be the first step on a journey that would change my life forever. Arriving at university felt like stepping into a completely different world. The campus was massive, full of polished buildings and people who walked with a sense of purpose. It was both intimidating and exhilarating. I had finally made it, but the weight of knowing that I was the underdog never left me. My scholarship barely covered my tuition, so I worked odd jobs to make ends meet. The first few months were tough. My classmates came from affluent families and spoke about vacations in Europe, weekend getaways, and expensive hobbies. I couldn't relate. I often ate alone, poring over my notes while eating cheap instant noodles. But instead of letting it discourage me, I used it as fuel. Every late night in the library, every extra hour spent revising, felt like a step closer to the life I dreamed of. One day, during an economics class, our professor announced we'd have a special guest speaker, a prominent businessman in the logistics industry. His name was Mr. Turner, and he had built an empire from scratch. The buzz around his visit was palpable. Everyone wanted a chance to impress him, and I was no exception. The day of the lecture, I arrived early to get a seat near the front. Mr. Turner was nothing like I expected. He wasn't flashy or loud. Instead, he spoke with a quiet confidence that demanded respect. He shared his journey, describing how he had started with a single truck and a dream, eventually building one of the largest logistics companies in the country. His words lit a fire in me. For the first time, I saw a clear path forward: logistics. It was practical, scalable, and ripe with opportunities. When the lecture ended, students swarmed around him, eager to ask questions or hand over resumes. I stood back, unsure if I should even try. After all, who was I compared to these polished students with their expensive suits and perfect diction? But as he turned to leave, something pushed me forward. "Mr. Turner," I called out, my voice steady despite the nerves. He stopped and turned to me, his piercing eyes locking onto mine. "Thank you for your lecture. It was incredibly inspiring. I'd love to learn more about your work and the industry." To my surprise, he smiled warmly and nodded. "What's your name?" I introduced myself, and we spoke briefly about my studies and aspirations. Before he left, he handed me his business card. "Send me an email," he said. "I'm always looking for sharp minds." I couldn't believe it. That simple exchange felt like the beginning of something monumental. I sent the email that same evening, carefully crafting every word. A week later, I received a reply. He invited me for an interview at his company. The day of the interview at Mr. Turner's company was one of the most nerve-wracking of my life. I stood outside the sleek, glass-paneled office building, trying to calm the storm in my chest. My suit was borrowed and slightly too big, but it was the best I could manage. This was my chance to prove I was more than just a scholarship kid from a modest background. As I walked into the building, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider. Everything about the place screamed success, the polished floors, the buzz of productivity, the confident professionals striding through the halls. After what felt like an eternity, I was ushered into a conference room where Mr. Turner waited. He greeted me with the same warm smile he had at the lecture. The interview was unlike anything I had expected. He didn't ask about my GPA or my family background. Instead, he wanted to know how I approached challenges. "What's the hardest thing you've ever done?" he asked. I told him about the time I worked 3 part-time jobs while balancing my classes, how I had to learn time management on the fly because failure wasn't an option. He listened intently, nodding occasionally. Then he leaned forward, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said. "I'm willing to take a chance on you, but you'll have to prove yourself." Those words were all I needed to hear. I was offered an entry-level position in the operations department. The salary wasn't much, but to me, it was everything: a foot in the door, a chance to learn, grow, and make something of myself. The first few weeks were grueling. I was thrown into the deep end, tasked with managing shipments, coordinating schedules, and solving logistical puzzles that had no easy answers. Mistakes were costly, and the pressure was relentless. But I thrived under it. I stayed late to understand the systems, asked endless questions, and even shadowed senior employees to pick up tips. Mr. Turner took notice. He began stopping by my desk to ask how I was doing. One day, he handed me a report and said, "I want your opinion on this." I spent all night analyzing it, finding ways to optimize the routes listed. When I presented my findings to him the next morning, he nodded approvingly. "This is good," he said. "Keep this up." That moment marked a shift. Over the next year, I was entrusted with bigger responsibilities. I spearheaded projects, streamlined processes, and even uncovered cost-saving measures that saved the company thousands of dollars. Every success was another brick in the foundation of my confidence. By the end of my second year, I was promoted to a team lead position. The work was demanding, but I relished the challenge. I finally felt like I belonged in this world of high stakes and endless potential. And all the while, an idea began to take shape in the back of my mind: what if I could create something of my own? By the time I hit my 3rd year at the company, I felt like a different person. I was no longer the timid, wide-eyed graduate who hesitated to speak up. I had become someone others turned to for solutions, someone trusted to lead when stakes were high. But with every achievement, the voice in the back of my mind grew louder: what's next? One evening, after wrapping up a particularly challenging project, I found myself in the office well past midnight. The building was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing monitor in front of me, and a thought struck me: why stop here? The logistics industry had become my world. I knew it inside and out, its inefficiencies, its potential for innovation, and its constant demand for better solutions. I had ideas, big ones, that I was sure could revolutionize how companies manage their supply chains. But the question loomed, how do I go from employee to entrepreneur? Around that time, Mr. Turner invited me to lunch. We had developed a rapport over the years, and he often sought my input on projects. As we ate, he asked a question that caught me off guard. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I hesitated, unsure how honest to be. Finally, I decided to take a leap. I want to run my own company someday, I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at me. He didn't react the way I feared. Instead, he chuckled. Good. Ambition is what drives the world forward. But remember, it's not just about ideas, it's about timing and execution. His words stuck with me. Timing and execution. I spent the next year absorbing everything I could, from operational strategies to financial management. I even started keeping a notebook filled with sketches of ideas, potential business models, and concepts for a lean, tech-driven logistics startup. The turning point came during my 5th year with the company. By then, I had saved enough money to make a small investment in myself. More importantly, I had built relationships with clients, suppliers, and industry veterans, who trusted me and respected my work. The pieces were falling into place. One night, as I sat at my dining table surrounded by papers and my trusty notebook, I made the decision. I was going to do it. I was going to start my own logistics company. It wasn't a rash choice, I had spent years preparing for this moment. But it was still terrifying. I was walking away from a stable career, from everything I had worked so hard to build. As I drafted my resignation letter, I thought about my parents and the sacrifices they had made for me. I thought about the struggles of my childhood, the nights I went to bed hungry, and the moments of doubt that had shaped me. And then I thought about the future, one I was determined to create on my own terms. The next morning, I handed the letter to Mr. Turner. He read it silently, then looked up at me with a knowing smile. "You're ready," he said simply. "Good luck." With those words, I stepped into the unknown, ready to build something that would change my life forever. Starting my own logistics company was a leap into the deep end. I had a vision of what I wanted to create, a lean, tech-driven operation that could adapt to the ever-changing demands of the industry. But turning that vision into reality was another matter entirely. The first few months were a whirlwind of chaos. I rented a small office space in a rundown part of town and hired a skeleton crew of just 3 people, an operations manager, a tech-savvy programmer, and a logistics coordinator. We were a scrappy team with one shared goal, to prove that we could do more with less. The early days were humbling. I worked long hours, often pulling all-nighters to make sure everything ran smoothly. Our first big break came from a former client I had worked with during my time at Mr. Turner's company. They had always appreciated my attention to detail and willingness to go the extra mile. When I approached them with my new venture, they hesitated but eventually agreed to give us a trial run. That contract was both a blessing and a test. The client needed us to manage shipments across multiple states, all while reducing delivery times. With limited resources, every hiccup felt monumental. Trucks broke down, software glitches caused delays, and there were nights when I doubted whether I had made the right choice. But we persevered. I spent hours on the phone with drivers, troubleshooting problems and personally coordinating routes to minimize downtime. My programmer developed a custom tracking system that allowed us to monitor shipments in real time, something that set us apart from larger competitors. Slowly but surely, we delivered on our promises, and the client renewed their contract. Word began to spread. Small companies in need of reliable logistics services started reaching out to us. We built a reputation for being nimble, responsive, and innovative. Every new client felt like a victory, but the challenges never stopped. Cash flow was tight, and I often dipped into my personal savings to keep the business afloat. One evening, I received a call that tested everything I had built so far. A major shipment for one of our biggest clients had been delayed due to a mix-up at a warehouse. The delay threatened to derail the client's entire supply chain for the week. I remember standing in the middle of our tiny office, my team looking at me with worried faces. "We'll fix this," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure how. I spent the next 12 hours on the phone, coordinating with the warehouse, rerouting trucks, and even hiring a third-party delivery service to ensure the shipment arrived on time. By dawn, the crisis was averted, and the client called to thank me for going above and beyond. Moments like that taught me what it meant to be a leader. It wasn't just about having ideas, it was about taking responsibility, even when things went wrong. With every challenge we overcame, my confidence grew, and so did the company. By the end of our first year, we had turned a modest profit, a small but significant milestone. I knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with more obstacles, but I also knew one thing for certain: I wasn't turning back. By the end of our second year, my company was no longer just a scrappy startup. We had grown into a lean but formidable player in the logistics industry. Word of mouth continued to bring in new clients, and our reputation for reliability and innovation opened doors I hadn't imagined possible. But with growth came new challenges. Managing a handful of contracts was one thing, juggling dozens across multiple states was another. I quickly realized that our manual systems and small team wouldn't cut it anymore. It was time to scale up, not just our operations, but our ambitions. I used the profits from our first 2 years to invest in technology. My programmer, who had been with me from the start, helped develop a proprietary logistics platform. This system automated route optimization, tracked shipments in real time, and even predicted potential delays using AI. It was a game changer. With this platform, we could handle more clients without needing a massive increase in manpower. Around the same time, I began attending industry conferences to learn and network. At one such event, I met a venture capitalist who specialized in funding logistics startups. We hit it off, and after several meetings, they agreed to invest in my company. That funding allowed us to hire more staff, lease additional trucks, and expand into neighboring states. The expansion wasn't without its hiccups. One of our first large-scale projects was a contract with a national retail chain. They needed us to manage their distribution network across 3 states, a daunting task for a company of our size. I remember standing in our new, slightly larger office, staring at the project outline with equal parts excitement and dread. Failure wasn't an option. I personally oversaw the planning, working late into the night to ensure every detail was accounted for. My team rose to the occasion, putting in long hours and solving problems on the fly. When the first quarter results came in, we had exceeded the client's expectations, reducing their shipping times by 15% and saving them thousands of dollars. That success solidified our reputation as a reliable partner for large-scale operations. Suddenly, we weren't just competing with other small companies, we were going head-to-head with the giants of the industry. One of the most surreal moments came when a competitor tried to buy us out. It was an offer worth millions, a staggering sum for someone who had once struggled to afford school supplies. For a moment, I was tempted. The money would have been life-changing. But I knew that selling the company at that stage would mean abandoning the vision I had worked so hard to build. I turned the offer down. That decision wasn't easy, but it was a turning point. It reaffirmed my commitment to growing the company on my terms. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, was for something bigger than a quick payout. As we entered our 3rd year of operations, we weren't just surviving, we were thriving. The company had doubled in size, and our name was becoming synonymous with innovation and excellence. But I wasn't satisfied. There was still so much more to achieve, and I was determined to see just how far we could go. By the time we entered our 4th year, the company was a recognized name in the logistics industry. Our cutting-edge technology, relentless work ethic, and commitment to delivering results had set us apart. But success doesn't come without challenges, and that year proved to be one of the toughest of my life. It started with an economic downturn that hit many of our clients hard. Several small businesses we worked with either scaled back their operations or closed their doors altogether. Our revenue took a hit, and for the first time, I found myself staring at a balance sheet that painted a grim picture. I felt the familiar pang of fear creeping in, the same fear I had felt when starting the company. But fear wasn't going to help. Action would. I gathered my team and told them the truth. Things are going to get tough, I said, but this company wasn't built to fold at the first sign of trouble. We've overcome every challenge so far, and this one will be no different. We doubled down on finding new opportunities. I personally reached out to potential clients, pitching our services with a passion that came from a place of survival. Some of those pitches were successful, bringing in contracts that kept us afloat. Meanwhile, I encouraged my team to think creatively. One of my managers came up with the idea to target e-commerce businesses, which were booming despite the downturn. We created a specialized service for online retailers, offering them faster shipping options and competitive rates. Within months, this pivot brought in new clients and stabilized our finances. But the year wasn't done testing me. One of our largest contracts, a deal that made up nearly 30% of our revenue, was suddenly cancelled. The client had decided to consolidate their logistics with a larger competitor. I was blindsided. I had poured everything into that relationship, and losing it felt like a personal failure. That night, as I sat alone in my office, I questioned everything. Had I bitten off more than I could chew? Was I in over my head? I thought about the risks I had taken, the sacrifices I had made, and the people who depended on me. Giving up wasn't an option, but I needed to find a way forward. The next morning, I came to a realization: the loss of that client wasn't the end, it was an opportunity. Without the weight of their demands, we could focus on diversifying our client base and improving our operations. I turned my frustration into fuel, driving myself and my team to work harder than ever. We launched a new marketing campaign targeting mid-sized companies, offering them personalized service that the industry giants couldn't match. We also introduced a loyalty program for long-term clients, which helped us retain existing business while attracting new customers. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall back into place. By the end of the year, we had not only recovered but had grown stronger. Our new focus on e-commerce and mid-sized clients had opened up markets we hadn't considered before. The storm had tested us, but it had also prepared us for the bigger challenges that lay ahead. I learned an important lesson that year: failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a part of it. Every setback, every loss, was a stepping stone to something greater. And I was determined to keep climbing. The 5th year of the company marked a turning point. The struggles of the previous year had forged us into a stronger, more agile operation. We were no longer just surviving, we were innovating, expanding, and making bold moves that would reshape the future of the business. One of those moves was international expansion. For years, we had focused exclusively on domestic logistics, but as e-commerce continued to grow, I saw an opportunity to serve clients with global ambitions. It was a risky move. Setting up international operations meant navigating unfamiliar regulations, dealing with customs, and building relationships with overseas partners. But I knew the potential rewards were worth it. To prepare, I spent months studying international logistics and traveling to potential markets. My first trip was to Europe, where I met with partners who could help us establish a foothold. I'll never forget the thrill of signing our first international contract, a deal to manage shipments for a growing retailer expanding into the US and Canada. The challenges were immediate. Time zones made communication tricky, and unexpected customs delays tested our ability to meet tight deadlines. But we adapted. My team and I worked tirelessly to refine our processes and ensure seamless delivery. Within 6 months, we had established a reputation for reliability, opening the door to more international clients. With success came recognition. Industry publications began to take notice of our growth, and I was invited to speak at a major logistics conference. Standing on that stage, addressing hundreds of industry leaders, was surreal. I shared the story of how I had started with nothing but an idea and a borrowed suit, how every challenge had taught me something invaluable. By the time I finished, the room erupted into applause. It was a moment I'll never forget. But growth wasn't just about expanding operations. It was also about giving back. I hadn't forgotten where I came from or the struggles that had shaped me. That year, I launched a mentorship program within the company, aimed at helping young professionals from underprivileged backgrounds break into the logistics industry. We partnered with universities to provide internships, scholarships, and training. Seeing the impact of these efforts reminded me why I had started this journey in the first place. The company's success was also personal. For the first time, I felt a sense of financial security I had never known growing up. I bought my parents a house, a modest but beautiful home that reflected everything they had sacrificed for me. When I handed them the keys, my father's eyes welled up with tears. "You've made us so proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But more than that, you've shown us what's possible." Those words stayed with me, fueling my drive to keep pushing forward. The milestones we had achieved were incredible, but I knew the journey was far from over. There were still bigger challenges to tackle, bigger dreams to chase. By our 6th year, my company had transformed into a powerhouse. We were operating in multiple countries, had a diverse portfolio of clients, and had doubled our revenue compared to the previous year. Yet, despite the success, I knew that in the logistics industry, complacency was the quickest path to irrelevance. Technology was evolving at a breakneck pace, and clients demanded faster, more efficient services. I wanted to stay ahead of the curve, so I made the bold decision to invest heavily in automation and artificial intelligence. It was a gamble, one that required a significant chunk of our profits, but I was confident it would pay off. We developed an AI-powered logistics management system capable of analyzing data in real time to predict delays, optimize routes, and streamline warehouse operations. Implementing it wasn't easy. There were bugs to fix, employees to train, and resistance to change. But I had learned that every innovation came with growing pains. Over time, the system began to revolutionize how we operated. For example, a client once had a shipment delayed by a storm. Using the AI system, we rerouted their cargo through an alternative network and managed to deliver ahead of schedule. The client was so impressed that they signed an exclusive contract with us, becoming one of our most loyal partners. Meanwhile, I focused on building a company culture that reflected my values. I didn't want my employees to feel like cogs in a machine, I wanted them to feel like part of a family. We introduced profit-sharing programs, flexible work arrangements, and opportunities for professional development. It wasn't just about attracting talent, it was about keeping the team motivated and engaged. And it worked. Employee turnover dropped, productivity soared, and the energy within the company became palpable. We weren't just growing as a business, we were growing as a community. That year, another major milestone came when we secured a deal with a global tech company. They needed a logistics partner capable of handling the complex supply chain for their new product launch. Winning that contract was the culmination of years of hard work, innovation, and persistence. It was also a stark reminder of how far we had come. I still remember the night I signed the deal. After the meeting, I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the skyline. The weight of the journey hit me all at once, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt. I thought about the kid I had been, sitting in the back of the classroom, dreaming of a better life. This was that life. But I knew I wasn't done. The company's success was a testament to what perseverance and vision could achieve, but I wanted to leave a legacy. My dream wasn't just to build a business, it was to build something that could make a lasting impact on the world. With that thought in mind, I began planning our next move, an initiative to make logistics more sustainable, reducing the industry's environmental footprint. It was an ambitious goal, but then again, ambition had gotten me this far. I built a life I'm proud of, a life that proves that no matter where you start, with enough hard work and a little bit of luck, you can achieve the extraordinary.